Hello, my name is Mary Thomas. I am with the firm of Thomas and Thomas PC. We are a state taxation consulting firm. We specialize specifically in transactions taxes, including sales and use tax. I've dropped a couple of videos specifically addressing questions that our clients have had about Texas sales and use tax returns and how you complete those forms to give to the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts. What I'm going to do now is expound on those ideas. The thing I want to say up front is that some of the information that I've been giving, it works for all jurisdictions. If you are reporting sales and use taxes to other states, then they do want a measure of what your sales activity in those states is. Look and see what their definitions of those numbers are. I've given you specific information as it relates to Texas. Other states may have slightly different definitions, but truly, what you have to do is just go in for every state that you work with. Make sure you understand what those definitions are. They want to know the level of sales that you have that should be allocated to those states, so they can go in and make sure that they're getting all of the tax dollars that that jurisdiction is due. When you're doing those allocations, go in and reconcile your return, your sales and use tax returns, with the information that you've supplied on your corporate income tax return or your franchise tax report, and reconcile it all to your federal income tax returns. That is universal no matter what jurisdictions that you're dealing with. This is all like a puzzle. All the pieces need to fit, and they all need to tick and tie, accounting speak. Now, in the previous videos, I talked about total Texas sales, and I did talk about the reconciliations and the importance of them, especially in an audit context, in previous videos. This video is going to be about the whittling down of that second line item in the Texas sales and use tax report, and that is taxable sales. Depending on what industry you are in, your total sales figure may not be the same as your taxable sales number. This is how it works. I'm going to stay with the same example. If you have an organization and the total sales for the complete organization is, and I'm just going to make this a monthly because my numbers are big enough that if you're generating this kind of money, normally you'd be a monthly filer. So let's say you've generated $4 million in 1 month. $3 million you've allocated to Texas, $1 million you've allocated to Louisiana. Well, within the definitions that we talked about in the 2 previous videos, if the number for Texas is $3 million, you'd report that as the total Texas sales. Just because that's the total Texas sales does not mean that that is the total taxable sales. This is a very important concept. There are reasons why that number would be different based on what industry you're in. If you are selling something that is not subject to tax, you're not going to include the value of those sales in the total taxable sales number. And there are some things that just aren't taxable. In Texas, we don't tax water. Starting July 1st, 2020, we don't tax internet access charges. There are just any number of anomalies, gifts, what have you, from the legislature. We don't tax those things. You would not include the value of those sales in your taxable sales figure. There are other sales that you're not going to include. If you're selling something directly to an exempt organization, you're not going to charge those organizations sales tax. Now, the thing about it is that you have to get an exemption certificate in order to be able to substantiate that. Exemptions are very narrowly construed and they are frowned upon. They don't want to give you that. So you have to do what they tell you to do in order to prove that that exemption is valid. And that means doing your paperwork the right way. And that's a small price to pay. Get the exemption certificate. There's one body where you don't have to get the exemption certificate. Those are some governmental entities. You don't have to get it. But if you're in that situation where you don't have to get it, then that means you're going to have a contract with that entity. Your purchase orders are going to have to be with that entity. Your invoices are going to have to be with that entity. Like I said, exemptions are very narrowly construed. Do your paperwork. You're going to have to make sure you do your paperwork perfectly in order to secure those exemptions within an audit context. Another reason why your taxable sales may be lower than your total sales would be if somebody issues you a resale certificate. What they're telling you is, you know what, don't charge me tax on this otherwise taxable thing because I'm just going to resell it to somebody. If somebody tells you that, you got to do, like I said, you got to do the paperwork, get that resale certificate. You have other clients that may tell you, if you deal with really big companies, you know what, I'm going to issue you a direct payment exemption certificate, a direct payment exemption certificate. Basically what they're saying is, don't charge me tax because I'm going to remit it directly to the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts. You can accept that as long as they give you the certificate. That will also take down your value of your total taxable sales. There are other instances in which that number may be whittled down. If you are selling something to an out-of-state customer, you're not going to report that if they are an out-of-state customer. And there are some gotchas hidden in there. So I'm just doing a broad spectrum of what will take that number down. But again, this is a documentation game, and there are some things that you'd have to do to substantiate that. All of it has to be substantiated. So those are people who, exemption certificates can also be issued by people who are in-state clients, but they're using the product either wholly or partially outside the state. You'd have to get an exemption certificate from those people to substantiate that you're not supposed to charge them tax. Those are the big ticket items. Those are the big categories of sales where you may not have to report them as taxable sales on the return. If you have any carve-outs as it relates to, hey, this is not a taxable sale, your documentation has got to be spot on perfect. And there is really no room for error with that. I see a whole lot of people who will come and tell me that, well, this is an exempt job. And I'm looking at them, I'm like, okay, where's the certificate? And they don't have one. This is a general overview, so I'm not going to get into what everything looks like. I will just tell you the high points of this. Exemption certificates are not interchangeable. If someone claims that something is exempt, you want an exemption certificate, not a resale certificate. And the same is true for resale certificates. I've seen people issue an exemption certificate and say, well, it's exempt because it's a resale. That does not fly. There is a resale certificate, and it asks for different information than what is required on an exemption certificate. So that number on your return, depending on what you do, those numbers, total sales and taxable sales, may be very different numbers. If they are different numbers, then that means you have an added layer of, you've got to make sure that the documentation and the substantiation for the tax-free nature of the sales are readily available, is complete, it is in the form that the state requires. Each state has different requirements. So you have to really pay attention to making sure that that documentation is correct. I hope that this general overview kind of gives you a basic understanding of what your responsibilities are. There'll be videos later about different exemption certificates. But again, I hope this helps you. If you haven't already, if you found the information to be helpful, consider subscribing to the channel. We're going to be issuing more information, and if you have any ideas of anything you'd like to see, drop us a line. You just might see it appear. I hope that helps. Take care. See you soon.